August 1945, two atomic bombs, two cities erased, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Japan surrenders. The entire nation lies in rubble, factories destroyed, infrastructure gone, millions dead, the economy completely flatlined. Now here is where it gets strange. 40 years later, that same country is buying Rockefeller Center. That same country is outproducing American automakers on American soil. That same country is the second largest economy on Earth. How does a nation go from nuclear annihilation to economic domination in a single generation? This is not luck, this is not Western charity, this is one of the most calculated economic resurrections in human history, and almost nobody talks about how it actually happened. Stay with me, because this story has lessons that most economics textbooks will never teach you. Why this matters now. Here is why you should care. Every decade, some nation attempts what Japan did. China tried it, South Korea tried it, Vietnam is trying it now. They all studied the Japanese playbook. But Japan wrote that playbook, and understanding how they did it helps you understand how global economic power actually shifts. It also reveals something uncomfortable, that economic miracles are not miracles at all. They are systems, strategies, and sometimes they are traps. Let me take you back to 1945. Japan after World War II was not just defeated, it was humiliating. The country had lost roughly 2.5 million soldiers. Another million civilians died. Major cities were bombed into moonscapes. Industrial production had collapsed to 10% of pre-war levels. Food was rationed, inflation was out of control, the black market was the only market. American occupation forces moved in. General Douglas MacArthur essentially became the shadow ruler of Japan, and here is where the first twist happens. The Americans did not want to punish Japan forever, they wanted to rebuild it, but not out of kindness. The Cold War was heating up. China had just fallen to communism. Korea was about to explode. America needed a strong capitalist ally in Asia. So they did something unexpected. They invested. The rebuild strategic transformation. Between 1946 and 1952, America poured billions into Japan through aid programs, technology transfers, and infrastructure projects. But money alone does not build an economy. Japan understood this. While America provided the capital, Japan built the machine. First, they reformed land ownership. Before the war, a handful of landlords controlled most of the farmland. After the reforms, millions of farmers suddenly owned their land. This created a new consumer class almost overnight. Second, they broke up the old industrial monopolies called zaibatsu, but here is the irony. Those same business networks quietly reassembled into new structures called keiretsu, same families, same connections, different names. Third, they created something most people have never heard of, a government ministry called MITI, the Ministry of International Trade and Industry. If you want to understand Japan's rise, you need to understand MITI. The engine MITI and industrial policy. MITI was not a regulator, it was a strategist. This ministry decided which industries Japan would dominate. Steel, shipbuilding, electronics, automobiles, they picked winners, they protected them from foreign competition, they gave them cheap loans, they coordinated research across companies. This is not free market capitalism, this is guided capitalism, and it worked. By the 1960s, Japan was exporting transistor radios to America. By the 1970s, they were exporting cars. By the 1980s, they were exporting fear. American manufacturers started panicking. Japanese products were cheaper, better, and more reliable. The phrase "made in Japan" went from insult to aspiration in 20 years. But here is the question I want you to think about. Can a government really pick economic winners, or did Japan just get lucky? Drop your take in the comments. The culture factor, hidden advantages. Now, economics alone does not explain Japan. Culture played a role, a controversial role. Japanese workers in the post-war era had something economists call high labor discipline. Long hours, low wages, minimal complaints. This was partly cultural, partly survival. The education system churned out engineers and technicians at a pace the West could not match. Savings rates were absurdly high. Japanese families saved nearly 20% of their income. That money flowed into banks. Those banks lent to corporations. Those corporations built factories. It was a closed loop, a machine feeding itself. And then came the 1980s, the peak, the moment Japan looked unstoppable. The peak bubble economy. By 1985, Japan had the second largest GDP on Earth. Only America was bigger. Japanese companies were buying American landmarks. Sony bought Columbia Pictures. Mitsubishi bought Rockefeller Center. The Tokyo stock market was exploding. Real estate prices in Tokyo made Manhattan look cheap. At one point, the land under the Imperial Palace was worth more than all the real estate in California. Read that again, one building's land, worth more than an entire state. This is where the story turns dark. Because what looked like economic dominance was actually something else. A bubble, a massive, historic, devastating bubble. The trap asset bubble in collapse. Here is what happened. Easy money from the Bank of Japan flooded the economy. Interest rates stayed too low for too long. Companies borrowed to speculate. Banks lent against inflated real estate. Everyone assumed prices would keep rising. They did not. In 1989, the Bank of Japan raised interest rates. The stock market crashed. Real estate collapsed. Banks were suddenly holding trillions in bad loans. Companies started failing. And then something strange happened. Nothing. No dramatic collapse, no Great Depression-style crisis, just stagnation year after year, decade after decade. Economists called it the lost decade, then it became the lost 2 decades, now some call it the lost 3 decades. Japan never fully recovered. The hidden math demographic time bomb. Here is the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to face. Japan's population started aging rapidly. The same workers who powered the economic miracle retired, birth rates collapsed, immigration stayed almost non-existent. By 2010, Japan had more elderly citizens than working-age adults could support. The dependency ratio inverted. Fewer workers, more retirees, less consumption, less growth. The machine that built Japan became the weight that dragged it down. And this raises a bigger question. Can any nation escape demographics? Is economic growth always temporary? Let me know what you think below. Hype versus reality. So what is the real story? The hype says Japan's rise proves that hard work and smart policy can conquer anything. The reality is messier. Japan benefited from American protection. They did not have to pay for their own military. That freed up capital for industry. Japan benefited from timing. The post-war global economy was hungry for cheap manufactured goods. Japan supplied them. Japan benefited from suppressed consumption. Workers were paid less than they produced. That surplus funded exports. It was brilliant, it was calculated, and it contained the seeds of its own failure. The bigger picture lessons for today. Here is why this matters in 2024. China followed the Japanese model. Export-led growth, state-guided industry, suppressed consumption, and now China is facing the same problems: debt bubbles, aging population, slowing growth. Is China heading for its own lost decades? And what about America? The country that rebuilt Japan now runs massive deficits while Japan holds trillions in American debt. The student became the creditor. Conclusion: the unresolved question. Japan is still the 4th largest economy in the world, still a technological powerhouse, still a cultural giant. But the miracle is over, the growth is gone, the population is shrinking. So here is the question I will leave you with. Was Japan's rise an economic miracle or an economic illusion? Did they build something permanent or just borrow growth from their own future? And more importantly, which country is making the same mistake right now? If you made it this far, you clearly care about how economies actually work. Subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this. And tell me in the comments, do you think any nation can replicate what Japan did, or was it a one-time event that can never happen again? I will see you in the next one.